One of the things I love about platformers is being given multiple abilities that make you pick and choose how to take on different challenges based on the abilities that you have. More importantly, I love it when games take this to the next level by giving you different forms which have specific abilities available only in that form, not in other ones. This is a well-known mechanic in the Mega Man games, with the new weapons you obtain from defeating a boss, and each form you take changes your blaster. This is also present in the Super Mario games, with all the power-ups you pick up like the Fire Flower, the Nuki suit, and the Flying Squirrel suit. This is the main mechanic I wanted to focus on for my mini project, and since I only gave myself 3 weeks to work on this, I didn't have time to make complex abilities. I gave my character 4 different transformations, each with a simple ability: a double jump, a dash, a slash attack, and the ability to not be detected by enemies. Now that we have the intro out of the way, let's start with the actual development of the game. So I started a game with just a circle and square. This is the main feature of the game that I am making. It is a platformer, so it has to have the standard play mechanics, which is running and jumping. And this is basically what I had to do to start the process. Just prototype the main player mechanic and then move on from there. After this, I made the enemies. I only have 3 simple enemies because this has to be a simple game. I only have a drone, a dog, and a soldier. The drone is simply a flying entity that follows the player's position. It doesn't have any attacks other than if a player touches the drone, the player dies. The dog simply is just on the ground chasing the player in a horizontal manner. So it doesn't jump in the air, it just stays on the ground, and when it sees the player, it rushes towards the player. The soldier is another simple mechanic. Soldier stays in place, he doesn't really move, and then if the player comes in the line of sight of the soldier shoots a bullet that kills the player. I only made simple enemies to not make the game too complex, and I already had the script from my existing project, which is Lumi the Last Light. I'm currently working on this, and I simply took the script of 3 enemies that have similar mechanics as the ones I just mentioned a while ago. Now, to make the game more challenging, obviously I can't just have 3 enemy types because that's gonna make the game too boring. I don't want to rely solely on platforming. I want to have different challenges other than the enemies. That's why I added hazards. And I only added 2, not to make things too complex. As I said a while ago, there's only the spikes. So spikes are stationary, they don't really move. If the player touches the spike, it's just the player's dead. It's just that. It's just another thing to avoid. And then we also have the laser, both a stationary and a moving laser. These things I added just to up the difficulty. Or something I really wanted this game to be is to be a platformer that really challenges the player. That's why I have so many different things that would make the player think on their feet, such as having enemies or hazards. Now that I have the simple mechanics done and out of the way, I moved on to making transformations for the game, which is the main mechanic. I already mentioned a while ago that the character has 4 different transformations. So pressing a button opens a selection menu, and the player decides which of the 4 to pick for transforming. And then if you move the right analog if you're using a controller or an arrow key on a keyboard, it selects a transformation, and then letting go of the transformation button, you will then transform into the form you wanted to go into. Or if you just let the timer go down, because if you open the selection screen, there is a timer wherein after a certain amount of time, you are forced out of the selection screen and either you transform or you don't, depending on whether or not you decided on a form. So to show this, I used different colors to highlight each ability. And then you notice that if you open the selection screen, time stops. So all the enemies stop moving so that you're able to decide on transformation. Later on becomes bullet time, so everything goes into slow motion so that it doesn't stop the movement of the player or the enemies. I didn't really want to have a stop in the movement of the game. I wanted to feel like it's continually going on even though you're in transformation mode. At this point, I'm basically done with the coding of the mechanics of the game. I have the enemies, the hazards, the player movement, running, jumping, even the transformation. I had to move on to level design because you can't really have a platformer if you don't have any levels. I usually do level design on a sprite. It just makes everything simpler for me because you don't really have to go through all the trouble of making your map from scratch, making all the art, and then testing the level. The plan for this game was that it would be multiple one-room stages. That was simple enough. I didn't want to have too many stages. There's a total of 17. And making it a single room per stage makes it a whole simpler because I don't have to make really complex or really grand stages for each level of the game. And then each room would have a different focus. Of course, there would be times I want the player to focus on the movement and your mobility options, which are the double jump or the dashes. Sometimes I want the player to have to deal with enemies, to whether or not you would want to kill the enemies or just go through them using the invisible state. And then other times it's just a mix of the two. The idea is to give player freedom to tackle the stage however they want to. I don't want it to be done in a single manner. I want the player to think on their feet. You can take on the stages in plenty of different ways. You can use just one ability, you can use multiple abilities, you can sometimes just not use any of the abilities. I think it's one of the things that I love about platforming games is that when they give you the freedom to take on the different challenges with different ways, and it's up to you to come up with a way of doing this. It makes everything so interesting and unique, and it's like every time you move on, it's a whole new feeling. It's not just the same. It's not a repeating thing that you have just use this ability whenever you encounter this problem. There are layers to it, and I really love that about the games that I play. And then after designing, obviously I have to test them out. And it was pretty simple since I made a sprite. On a sprite, I just exported that into Unity for testing. And then I would just put colliders on all the bricks, all the black bricks, and then the colored ones would be the player or the enemies. And then I would test the platform, the hazards, and the enemy placements to check whether or not they are in the right place or they're too big of a gap or too small of the gaps between platforms. And obviously, part of the test is the difficulty. I don't want to make a stage that's practically impossible, but I still want a challenging aspect to the game. That's why multiple stages are obviously meant to give you a more difficult time, but that's just part of the unique experience of the game. And then after that it was just simply I was just adding the assets for the stage. The artwork for the environment was taken from 0x72 on itch.io. I will link it down in the description, but they made a really wonderful tile set for a robot themed sort of map, and that's in theme with the game, which is like a military setting because it is like, Area 51. So it just went well with the theme of the game. So I just used a grid in Unity. It just made everything so much easier. And since it was a tile set, it was pretty simple. It's just simply dragging and dropping the tiles that you want to be placed in a specific part of the grid, and it just made everything so much simpler. And then there were also times that I had to change platform colliders because there were changes in the design of the stage. Like when I was putting in the assets. It looked so much better sometimes when I made a part of the stage, like a platform, bigger or smaller or wider or thinner. It just really happens when you have assets, because your assets could maybe look different from what you thought it could look. Next was obviously the animations. You can't really have a game that doesn't look like it's moving. And I really want to take this time to thank my friend Dupe for the sprites he made for this game. He made all the art and animations for the player and the enemies, and I think he did an awesome job at it. There was simple animations. The only ones that had the animations were the enemies and the player, and all the transformations of the player would have a run and jump animation. But that would mean that there had to be 5 different animations for running and jumping, because the player has 4 transformation plus the base player sprite. And then each transformation would have a specific animation depending on the ability. So the double jump would have a different animation from the regular jump to distinguish it from just having jump for the first time and knowing when you actually did a double jump. And then the dash would obviously be its own sprite animation, and the slash, which is probably the one with that transformation, will have the most animation because you have a slash for horizontal and then upwards and downward slashing. Then the ninja didn't really have any transformation because it didn't have an ability outside of the fact that the enemies aren't able to see the player. So that transformation is pretty straightforward. And the enemies all had simple animations. So the drone, it's just swooping animation. And then the dog is just the running, and then the soldier is just a state of standing and then aiming. It's pretty simple. After this, it was just adding the extra things to make the game full, like adding sounds, background music, the sound effects, and then the menus to move from one part of the game to the other. There is a main menu, credits, level selection screen, and then the actual stages. And that's just basically putting everything all together and making it a game that's playable. And then that was that. I finished the game after doing this. It's like this was 3 weeks in after I started, and it just became a big thing. I think this is just something that usually happens with indies. You can't help yourself thinking that you're gonna go into a game that you're gonna be making and then think it'll be simple and then realize it's more complex than it is, or sometimes you just want to add more things to the game. But because I gave myself a deadline, it was easier to stop myself from making it too big. And then that was it. I released it on August 7th on itch.io. Even though it was meant to be small, it was still a stressful project. It's never really easy to make a game, and given the time constraint of 3 weeks, it makes everything just that much more stressful. But I did have fun. It was a learning experience. This is something I will be continue doing for the next months, and I just really enjoyed the whole process. This is actually a game of the month type of project. I'll be making a game which started in July, and then be continuing this as time moves on. And every mini game will be a game that focuses on a mechanic that is needed to be implemented for my game that I already mentioned a while ago, which is Lumi the Last Light. That is basically the bigger project of the whole thing. It's a game with a bigger scope, which will maybe take a year to finish. But this is something that I do for Patreon to help support myself, and I do this so that my patrons are able to get something every month. So every month they get this game that I'm doing for the specific month, and for this month it was this games. Storm of the 51st, they get it for free for being a patron. But of course, I do have it available for purchase on itch.io. If you want to play it, you can just go over there and then buy the game. And I really want to know what you think about it, so any feedback would be really awesome. If you just comment on the game on itch.io or comment on this video, it would mean so much to me. Speaking of the patrons, I really want to thank you guys so much. I can't be doing this and going full indie without the help of you guys, and it really means a lot. For you who aren't patrons, I still am very thankful that you checked this video out. If you are interested in the game, you go ahead, check itch.io. If you're interested in finding more about me, you can check out Patreon. It's just patreon.com/PHFaust. And yeah, thank you very much for watching this video, and peace.